Well, election is not due until March next year, but the practice has always been that we call for elections much earlier, stipulated as far back as late last year. Datuk Sri Najib postponed it to March and to July, and now possibly September or towards the end of the year, which also reflects the lack of confidence on the part of the ruling UMNO-led coalition. Due to the state of the economy, the disconnect with the masses, and the endemic corruption that has surfaced. Well, thank you. And yes, of course, because despite the fact that I still don't believe, as we have expressed through Bersih rallies, that the election is going to be fair and free. We have adduced, unlike in the past, some specific evidence to suggest that there has been fraud in terms of electoral lists, etc. And we are calling for international observer team to ensure the elections are and remain free. We'd be able to secure a comfortable majority, John. You know, in 1999, when I was in prison, this was the first time that we registered a comfortable almost 60% of the ethnic Malay support. And at that time, the ethnic Chinese and Indians in particular felt that this is purely a Malay battle, and therefore they better stay away. But I think in the last years, when UMNO tried to regain Malay support and starts talking about extreme nationalism and Malay supremacy, they have alienated to a large extent. And some of the policy, for example, alleging that I, in particular, and the Pakatan Rakyat coalition is now opening up for massive Christianization, unsubstantiated, but clearly used to plant seeds of fear, or culture of fear, amongst our Malaysians at large. Then, of course, from Mahathir, and then Najib said if Anwar is to become Prime Minister, he would sell the country to ethnic Chinese. I mean, these things would sound odd or nonsensical to many of us, but they are targeted, of course, to the rural Malay base, which this shows clearly a sign of desperation. Yes, it's unfortunate because the last serious incident was 1969 May riots. And since then, things have gotten better. And we, at least in the opposition coalition, we have shown, that we appear even most rallies together. Myself and from the Justice Party, even the Islamic Party and the Democratic Action Party, which is essentially Chinese, ethnic Chinese led. They, of course, accuse us of virtually reneging on our social contract to respect the royalty or Malay language or Islam. We have denied this, and we have, to the contrary, adduced evidence to suggest that these party leaders have even given undertaking to support the constitutional guarantees, even on Malay privileges. But what we are against is the abuse. Because all this so-called Bumiputra policy, has enriched the family of Prime Minister and ministers and their cronies by the billions. The masses of the Malays, or the indigenous people, including in Sabah and Sarawak, remain virtually the same. What is unique and spectacular in our experience is, number one, we have opted for a peaceful transformation process. I mean, what I went through, the beating, the assault, and this imprisonment, would probably call most people to resort to more aggressive or violent means. But we have opted for constitutional method, focusing on the elections and not to the streets. Secondly, to counter this racist and extremist or religious bigotry played by the UMNO leaders, we have instead resorted to a coalition, ethnic-based, coalition of ethnic groups and cultural, multi-religious coalition. Although accepting the interests of the majority in terms of the position of Islam, or Malay privileges, or Bahasa, the national language, and even to respect the position of the Malay royalty. But I think this is certainly a welcome move, because for the first time in modern Malaysian history, you have a multi-ethnic coalition effectively to counter. I mean, this is actually the reconciliation, not between the government and the opposition, but reconciliation among the masses. But to the government, I've always suggested to Najib, you should bring civility in this course of politics. You should not use the media, the courts, to demonize the opposition, beat up people. I mean, my experience, of course, is unfortunate, but I think I'm prepared to go beyond that and asking him to do that. Unfortunately, they have not learned from the Indonesian transformation or in the neighbors, or even the Arab awakening or uprising. Yeah, I've avoided to use Arab Spring, because many of my Arab colleagues there prefer Arab awakening or Arab uprising. It doesn't matter. But essentially, it is a clamor for freedom, for justice, for reform.
Is Malaysia having an awakening?
Clearly, yes. Although I mean, both the activists, social activists, and the opposition party leaders have always called on the people to use the ballot as an option, which is quite unique, because people say go to the streets, demand, particularly when the ballot is now is a major suspect in terms of the rigging. Yes, because people, 6th, of course, I was a first-year student in the university, but because I was a student activist, naturally you get yourself dragged into the process. The race equation was there and relevant. The majority Malays feel that there's no security in terms of their well-being and their future. The ethnic Chinese feel that they're being discriminated against. So they resorted to having measures to alleviate poverty, social mobility by giving additional support, affirmative action, mainly to the Malays. But 3 decades have passed. So we are saying, why can't we replace this by pursuing an effective affirmative action agenda across race for the deserving and those in need? So it should be need-based policies, number one. And then, as of course, appeal. I work also with the Chinese, all right, the ethnic Chinese, who are generally, of course, doing extremely well economically, but also Chinese poor, marginalized. Now, I have not heard anyone complaining about affirmative action policies, if it is based on need. Now, 80% of the support goes to the Malays, but the 20% poor ethnic Chinese or ethnic Indians will not be discriminated against or ignored. That level of comfort is important. Now, how does the ruling coalition, UMNO, counter this? By saying, well, under Anwar, you will lose that. See, we counter say, look, to the contrary, if we have $10 billion now, we share it to the masses through good quality democratization of access to quality education or public health, you would give to the cronies and you will have new Malay Bumiputra billionaires. So there's a different sort of an approach towards this thing. You know, they're responding, by the way. Because, yeah, they're responding in a sense that they're now giving 500 ringgit to each family prior to the elections. You see, that is to them affirmative action.
Right. To minorities or to the Malays?
To all
To the
poor.
Chinese, to the
Yeah,
Indians?
yeah.
That's their affirmative action before every election.
Yeah. No, when I was much younger, reading Lincoln's Malice Towards None, which is just theoretical construct. But you realize after you went through, and to have the strength, and as we learned from Mandela or Gandhi or the rest, yeah, it takes a lot of courage. To me, it is more courageous to say, let's move on. I did that precisely in 2004. Regrettably, they went on, you see, with impunity to inflict harm to me personally, my family. But still, you have a bigger agenda in life. I want to prove that politics must be guided by certain ideals, ethical principles. And Malaysia has this enormous capacity to transform itself as a vibrant economy, pooling all the resources, the strength of the greatness of the Malay culture, the ethnic Chinese industriousness, and the Indian, the ethnic Indian cultural traits. So I think, why can't we do this? So if you are preoccupied in ensuring there is this harmony and reconciliation among the racial groups, and number two, to build up that new force of Malaysian economy and cultural empowerment, you won't have time to pick this nitty-gritty of what you suffered 20 years ago. And many people have suffered immensely compared to what you have endured. So I think we move on. Yeah, it's an interesting question because you see, unlike in some other countries, my experience is with the UMNO, and many of those who are in the leadership, in UMNO leadership, were my old colleagues. Now I fail to understand why they have that state of denial, seeming to be completely oblivious to the changes taking place. I mean, you talk about efficiency, rule of law, economic welfare in Singapore, far, superior. But what they lack is probably some ingredients of freedom and democratic rights. And you see the people's clamoring for change and reform. It's impressive. But you see also Indonesia, Of course, in the media in Malaysia, the only thing they see about Indonesia is corruption and probably riots. And that has probably helped to have this, so strong prejudice. Reformasi is equal to demonstrations and riots. Chaos, you see, which is grossly unjust. And because you have seen how the institutions are being built here. Yes, they talk about corruption. Yes, there's still marginalization. But they debate about it, you see. And no one is secure. I remember having breakfast with President SBA some years back. He said, look, Anwar, I'm not getting a good media report compared to what you are getting. Because possibly because I happen to be seen like, this oppressed or harassed opposition leader. But which is actually the strength and the potential. Notice, I look at the track record. I'm not saying that, I'm still critical of some of the economic policies in terms of looking at Gini coefficient or marginalization. But look at investments, look at growth, look at the vast rise that Indonesia have achieved in the last few years. I mean, I was observing this, John, in meticulous detail as finance minister those days. In the 1990s, we were decades above Indonesia. Now probably years. You see, what went wrong? Issue of governance, issue of democratization. You see, I'm of course great friend of Amartya Sen. So it is this development's freedom, is a very important, compelling thesis that freedom would allow, greater empowerment. Of course, there are problems. I mean, you know, some extremist fanatics here and there, but you have seen even Thailand, the movement is more steady now. Myanmar, I have of course strong reservations about the slow pace and the plight of the Rohingyas now. But other than that, you can see also some more positive measures, the Philippines and Indonesia. So hopefully these elections, Malaysia will join this wave of democratization, which is, democratization is quite a limited term, but actually it's essentially a reform, a rule of law, a responsible government. And I'm of course, I'm a great friend of Indonesia. In that sense, I also am able to view objectively about the, the vibrancy here. I mean, not just politics and governance. You look at the debates in the media, in the social society, right. It's immense.
Free press,
the free press, yes.
Yeah,
even on issue about Islamic State, governance, law, rights of women, gender equality, the debates. And you can, it's unfortunate in Malaysia. It's just so quiet, so timid. So about the system so oppressive. When we talk about Islam now, you see, the fear of Christianization. You are being a liberal Islam. There's so many constraints that cause you to fear. People just, stay away. I'm bringing Tariq Ramadan to my house about Thursday night. Quite charming, young, intellectual, highly respected. And immediately he start, you see, Anwar is now promoting another liberal school and pluralistic school. I mean, Tariq is a committed Muslim. He does. I mean, not the liberal in the sense that you are quite agnostic or but still, And they have now one impending charge against me for my lecture at the London School of Economics on Islam and pluralism, to say that I'm promoting pluralism. I mean, pluralism in the sense that. You tolerate, you work with the others. I still pray. So, but having said that, John, I remain very optimistic that change will happen very soon in Malaysia. Inshallah, as we say.